Hey there, FlossTube. This is Cathy, the hands-on designer. I'm coming at you on a sunny Friday afternoon. It's April 10th. It's Good Friday, so Good Friday to you. And I wanted to shoot a tutorial today for the ribbon edge technique. Last week when Mr. Haberman, Mr. HOD, and I were filming our little happy hour FlossTube, we did a section on Q&A, some questions and answers. And one of the questions that I got was, would I do a tutorial on the ribbon edge technique? And perfect timing, because I was actually looking for a subject to shoot a tutorial, because it really seems like that you use those. So I often get emails saying, thank you for this tutorial. Would you ever do this? And so I love the ideas that you give me. So here we go. Now, I assume when she asked about the ribbon edge, she was referring to, I've used it in a variety of my finishes, but I assume that she was talking about the finishes that I've done this is the Farmhouse Chalk series. This is one of the series that I've done with Priscilla Blain. She draws the lovely artwork, and then I take the artwork and I make it into something to stitch. So if you remember with that series, you got the large piece that I framed, and then you also got, we call it the sign, all right, and that's got the name of the farm on it. And then it also came with a small, which mine I finished all as little pillows. And I did actually a tutorial on that. So so this was Holly Jolly Farm. I'll do them, and then you can see the ribbon edge. I did kind of a dark ribbon. And then this, of course, was Star Spangled Swine. And I did a pretty red and white gingham ribbon. And then I actually had to go get this out of my kitchen to film this Carrots and Cottontail Farm, because I had it on display in my kitchen for Easter, which is this weekend, of course. So I guess I kind of assume that that's what she meant by the ribbon edge technique. There's a number of ways to do the ribbon edge technique. I'm going to show you my way. I'm not saying it's the only way. I'm just saying it's the way that I do it. I find it's the easiest to do on something like this. And there are certainly other techniques. There's a hand sewn method. There's a method you could do on pillows with beads. This, I'm going to be using ball head pins. And really, it's the best way on something stiff like this. So I'll talk to you a little bit about the construction of this. The stitching is actually laced over a piece of mat board with I'm trying to get mat board and foam core. I get kind of confused with those two. So the stitching is actually laced and stretched over a piece of mat board, which has 2 layers of cotton batting. And then where this gray and white gingham is, that's actually a piece of foam core that's cut to size. And then of course on the back, I finished it off nicely, so you don't see the ugly side of finishing. I covered that, and that's another piece of mat board. So you can kind of see the sandwich layers. You've got your laced needlework mat, you've got your fabric covered foam core, and then your fabric covered mat board. Now, the way I fabric cover the mat board and the foam core that are on the back is with the double-sided acid-free stitchery tape. I actually did a tutorial on that already. I believe, let's see, I wrote it down. It's tutorial number 23. I showed you how I fit a bottom of a tray. It's the same technique that you can use to finish. That's why I did the tutorial on that, because it's such a versatile method of finishing. All right. So as I said, my ribbon is actually in there with pins. So I know a lot of you have vast collections of fabric, linen, Aida, patterns, charts, hand-dyed threads. And I'm not saying I don't have my fair share, but actually what I probably collect the most are items for finishing. I keep a lot of that stuff on hand. So we're talking ribbons and pins. So I like to have a selection of pins handy, and I'm going to show you here what I can't lean it down too much because then everything will fall off, but I want to take a pretty picture for the cover shot. So when I go into a quilt shop or a hobby store or one of the big box stores, I always go into the crafting section and I see what kind of pins they have. I just love collecting and having on hand pins with different color ball heads on them, because you never know what colors you're going to be trying to finish. So I like to, it's so convenient when I actually have the colors on hand. So just to give you some idea what I'm talking about, you know, that's a lovely tealy green, perfect for, like, say, Christmas ornaments. I found these, I've got a few left. I guard my pins. I actually found a quilt shop was discounting these, clearancing them out, and which was great because they were expensive pins. And it's this beautiful crystal blue and kind of a yellowy apple green color. I have pink, I have white. Some have longer pins on them, and some come multicolor, and they come in just the cutest like boxes. And then I also collect little boxes that's got the red pins in it. And then another one I just collected. I just like keeping the container. Aren't the containers cool? And this one, of course, had orange pins in it. And boy, don't you know, I use those for a lot of Halloween things. So it's great to have a nice selection of pins on hand. The other thing, of course, will be ribbons, and I'll talk about those a little bit as well. I like to use, for like what I used on all of these, is I used a 3/8 inch ribbon. And you want to, you know, you'll get your ribbon that comes in a little spool like that. And again, a lot of times you can get them on sale. Much like I collect pins, I also kind of collect ribbons. I have a little ribbon problem. And I like to use ribbons for this type of thing where the design is on both sides. All right, so this is, I opened one of these up, and this is a polyester ribbon. So you can see it's got great flow to it, all right, which is what you want when you're doing a ruched edge. Plus, you've got the design on both sides. It's woven through. Now, this is an example you could use, but I want to point out that while it's 3/8, it's a tighter weave. This is definitely more like a grosgrain. It's just a different weave. It's also polyester, and it, you know, it has some flow to it, but you're going to notice, as much as I love my polka dots, those polka dots are printed. So by the very nature of what we're doing, you're going to see both sides of that ruched ribbon. So if you're okay just having one side that's plain, and that may show a lot, but I'm sorry, I love my dots and I want to see my dots. So I probably, it's not wrong to use something like this. It's just probably something I wouldn't use. So I like to find something that's, like I said, it's printed, it's on both sides, the way it's woven. So I think what we're going to do is, we've talked about ribbon and we've talked about pins. I prepared 2 little boards so I can show you what I did. And because everybody's going to ask, what's the fabric? The fabric is, it's called Evergreen. Sorry, I had to check my notes. It's called Evergreen by Basic Gray. I love Basic Gray. They speak my love language when it comes to their designs on quilt fabric. So I just quickly covered a piece of foam core, so you can see it's slightly thicker, and then a piece of mat board, so I can kind of demonstrate doing that on each of these. As I said, this type of pinning technique for a ribbon edge is good for a hard surface. I would not pin into a pillow, okay? It just isn't gonna hold, I guess. There's ways to do that with a sewing needle and beads and that type of thing. We can do that another time, but I think this is probably what we'll just stick to for today. So I am going to stop it here, and we're going to turn that camera down, and we'll show you a little bit of how we do this easy technique. All right. Okay, so we're back. So I've got my ribbon. I chose to go with this red and white gingham, and I've got my fabric covered piece of mat board, and then I'm going to use some of my white pins. Now, when we're going into foam core, you have something more to really go into and hold the pin. So really, any length of pin you can do with a slightly longer pin, or you can do with a shorter pin. I would say this is probably about 1.25 inches long. So I would say that's actually a very long pin. So what I like to do is, I actually like to go ahead and put pins, several pins at a time, in my ribbon, so that I'm not constantly having to you know, place it, pin it, place it, pin it. So I like to, I guess I call it preloading or pre-pinning my ribbon. Now I'm working straight from the spool, and I happen to just open this spool up. And I'm sure you're probably thinking, well, how much ribbon does it take? I like to leave at least about a 5-inch end on either side. So you would want 5-inch and 5-inch, and then measure all the way around. And then I would double that measurement. I'd actually probably add a little bit extra after that even, because I do most of this. I just kind of eyeball it. But that would give you enough. Typically I actually work straight from the spool, so I don't have to worry about whether or not I have enough ribbon. Now you'll notice, because of the way the ruching sort of, the ribbon sort of folds in and folds out, if you would say run out of ribbon, it would be very easy to hide a start and a stop point with ribbon somewhere along the edge. So it really is quite an easy technique. So I'm going to just kind of eyeball in about 4 to 5 inches. Really what this length tells me is how much I can have to tie that bow at the bottom later. So I'm going to go ahead and put my pin in. Now the whole idea is that our pin is going to go through the ribbon at an angle. All right. Instead of, I'll show it easier like this. Instead of my pin going through the ribbon this way, I'm actually going to have it be about a 45-degree angle. Please don't go get your protractor and make sure each one is the same. You can really just eyeball. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go in. Hopefully you're seeing this okay. I'm going to go through the ribbon, kind of pop my needle back up, down through the ribbon, and pop my needle back up. So that's what I look like. I actually went in and out of it twice. Hopefully you can see what that looks like. All right. Then to get this look of thickness with my ribbon, I put my pins in. Like I said, I kind of pre-pin ahead with several pins. I put my pins about 1 inch apart. Now, if I work on this particular gingham, because obviously you can tell I've used this gingham a lot, to be sure, I count about eight blocks. And then sometimes I get lazy and I just kind of eyeball it. But so I'm going to take a couple of my pins and I'm going to go like this. I'm going to kind of eyeball 1 inch. And you can see I'm kind of moving the needle or moving the pin, rocking it back and forth. So I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I'm going to put my next pin in there. And I just sort of rock it back and forth. So it's like I'm almost sort of basting it, doing a basting thread with my needle. So I go under, above, under, above. So you can sort of see now what that looks like. I've got several going there. I'll do a couple more. And you do have to be careful because these do, the pins are, well, they're pins, they're sharp. So as you hold that fabric, like you can see, or hold the ribbon like you can see, or you just make one come out, it can dig into your palm. So never a good idea to bleed on the ribbon. That's kind of a good metaphor for life, isn't it? Deep messages while we do finishing. All right, I'm going to put a couple more in. As you can see, I'm just sort of rocking it back and forth. Preloading my ribbon. And you can see I've got a bunch of, hopefully you can see that. I am having a hard time seeing the camera, but you can see that I've got a number of, almost at a, like I said, a 45-degree angle. And they've gone through in and out of the ribbon twice. Okay. So then I'm going to grab my piece. Now I'm going to call this the bottom just because it's a directional print and I've got my birds this way and I don't want my birds to be upside down. So I'm going to you can either measure and figure out where your center is, or you can really truly just eyeball it. And I'm going to call that my center. Now, because I'm a righty, I work with the piece facing me. Pretend that this is needlework. Okay. Pretend this is your cross stitch. If I was working on one of these, I'm actually pinning directly into the edge of this piece. Now remember, this is a mat board. I'm using foam core. It's slightly thicker. We'll talk about this in a minute. All right. So when the needle or when the pins go into the side of the edge of the foam core, I want them to go, see how we put them through the ribbon on an angle, but when I put them into the foam core, it's going straight up and down. So that action of just moving the pin is going to cause a little bend or fold. Boy, I almost said that wrong. Bend or fold in the ribbon. And that's what gives it that ruched look. So you can see there's my center. I just went slightly next to my center, and my ribbon, the first one's easy. You don't have to think about how far apart to put them. It's just gonna go in and we're gonna anchor, and the pin is straight up, down it goes. Now you can see how that kind of just folded, clamped down on the ribbon. All right, that's what we want it to do. So now what we need to do is I put these pins, excuse me, about an inch apart. So we don't want to put them in an inch apart. I actually want to bring it in, I would say actually about a ½ inch, 3/8 to ½ an inch. So you can see how that ribbon bunches up like that. And I'm gonna go ahead and put this one in. And so you can see how I've got that first little kind of dimple in the ribbon. So I'm ready to do my next one. And I'm really just eyeballing. In the beginning, if you want to grab a little ruler and say, okay, my pins are an inch apart, I want them, as they go into the edge of the foam core, I want them to be ½ an inch apart. Because truthfully, that's really more like 3/8 of an inch apart. But I'm okay with that. So I just put it in, and I'm ready to put the next one. And after a while, you get comfortable with how far apart the ribbons need to go. And you can kind of even train it. Can you already see how that's just making a fun little edge? All right, I'm gonna keep doing a few more. Now, I'm gonna tell you a trick when it comes to corners. But I'm gonna put a few more in. So you can see I'm grabbing it where it's at, the pin's at an angle, and I'm actually turning it to go perpendicular to the edge of the piece. And you can just see how that's just kind of making that fun little, it's, okay. If you're like me, I'm a symmetry person. You know, if I've got 3 bumps on that side, I want 3 bumps on this side, and they all have to face the same direction. That's the thing with this ribbon technique, is it's going to look, I call it a little messy. It's not all going to go in the same direction. That's kind of the fun of it. That's why we use a ribbon that's about 3/8. And it's just sort of, some go in, some go out, some flop this way, some flop that way. That's the fun of it. Okay. So if you like symmetry, either get over it or do a different edge. Cause it's just kind of fun. It just sort of goes whichever way it wants to. You can train it a little bit. So I'm getting close to the corner. I'm going to quick pop a couple more pins in, so I can work my way around the corner, because I want to kind of show you what I do there. So let me and you can see I'm totally just eyeballing. I've done this enough, but if you want to get a little ruler to have handy. And I'm sorry that I'm not doing like a complete overhead shot. I'm not fancy schmancy. I don't have like a whole video set up where I can actually see what I'm doing. So I have to be able to look at the camera just a little bit. But I think hopefully you get the gist of it and you can see what I've got going. So I am putting in a few more pins. All right, so I've got a few more pins going. So I'm going to put the next one in. All right, and see, that's what I mean now. Some of these the loops have kind of gone to the back. This one came to the front. Now, when I turn a corner, I don't really particularly like to put a pin in the corner. I just like to get 2 pretty close to the corner, but without like going through the corner. So you can see I'm pretty close to that edge of that corner there, but I'm not on the corner. I'm just in, maybe about a 1/16 of an inch. So I put my pin in there. Now I'm going to turn this way, and I'm going to go that close again on this side and put it in. All right, so this way you can see where my 2 pins are, but it gives me that little bit of that loop on the corner as well. So I don't go into the corner, I just go close to the corner on this side, close to the corner on the next side. And I'm ready to go. And just keep, it's actually kind of fun and therapeutic a little bit, unless it makes you nervous. And don't be nervous. So I've used up all my pins so far, and but doesn't that look cute so far? Now I will say, when you get all the way to the other end, so here's my center, and again, just like on the corner, I just came a little bit to the left of the center right there, and I'll end on the right of the center there. Then I'll have my two ends, and I'll just tie them in a cute little knot. Like there, I did a little bow. And on this one, I actually just tied them, and then I trimmed them, and I just let it kind of, you know, hang like that. And then on this one, looks like I kind of did a bow. Now, what I did is on this particular one, I know I did because I can tell by looking at it, I felt like my loops were really loopy. Okay. Plus I wanted to mat the loops down a little bit, because I did remember, this is the one that I didn't use a pretty ball head pin. I used just a regular old straight pin. So I actually took an iron to my sides when it was all done, and I held the iron there, not too long. We don't want to melt our ribbon, but I flattened them. So you can actually see my loops are creased a little bit, and it kind of flattens it out. I still get that fun, sounds goofy to say, but kind of that fun, lumpy, bumpy edge. You know, some of the folds are going this way, some are going that way, some are going this way. But it's actually just a little flatter. And like I said, I kind of did that just so I could sort of hide the pins a little bit. If you do that and you're using like a plastic ball head pin, again, don't hold the iron there very long, because you know what's going to happen. You're going to be cleaning that iron. Anyway, so I actually really like what's happening here. I've got one kind of coming forward like this, because eventually, if you think, well, it doesn't show very much, when I did this, I actually placed it, say, on another piece of fabric, and what that does is it sort of scooches all of my little folds and flounces to the front a little bit. Okay, so you can kind of see what that's looking like. Isn't that darling? Okay, so I would say for your first one, you might, if you're really thinking, oh, I don't know if I can do this, it's definitely easier to pin into the edge of foam core, because like I said, it's thicker. You've got something that pin can really grab into. So, and I didn't worry about the length of my pins as much. So let's kind of put this aside. And well, I kind of screwed up, because I actually and getting ready for this, I preloaded this pretty ribbon. And it's got really long pins. I'd say these are definitely 1.25 inch pins, but you can see how much I did. And I should have used that on the foam core. So what happens is we're going to be putting pins into the edge of the mat board. It's a little more difficult. So because it's not as wide to catch as the foam core. All right, so we'll do the same thing. I'm going to try it. See how it goes here. So my suggestion would definitely be to use a shorter pin. Like I've got this little set here, multicolor, and you can definitely see compared to these, oh my goodness, they're about half the length. So if you're trying to get that through the edge of a piece of foam core, my vote is to go for the shorter pin. Now, you really want to bury that pin into the edge of the mat board, the mat board. If the pins come out the back, number one, you got to be careful as you're holding it that you don't, go through your hand as well. They might, to some degree, come through the back. Just know that you're going to have to, when you actually mount this, like, this, onto the piece that you're going to back it with, you'll have to make sure that the pins are flat enough with the back of your mat board that when you attach it, they will lay flat. All right. But I'm going to demonstrate that a little bit so you can kind of see what happens. There we go. All right. So let's start. Let's see if I can do this. Okay. This is total experiment. So this could totally flop while I'm filming. So I did the same thing again. This is the directional. So I'm going to start here just a little bit to the left of the center. and I take my pin's in the diagonal, but I'm going to put it, insert it into the edge of the mat board straight up and down. Okay, that actually went in pretty well. Okay, so my first one's in. So I'm ready to do pin number 2. The reason why I say the shorter pins is because the long, you know, you're going through something that's just a little bit thinner, and if the pin changes direction a little bit, it can come out the back. Okay, I'm actually, okay, I'm going along, and I'm doing okay because I'm pushing straight down. Oh, that one did not. So you kind of might have to pull it out. And that's the beauty of this. If you don't like the way your ribbon is laying and you think, oh, that pin was too close, guess what? You can easily pull it out and redo it. Okay, I have to say I'm having pretty good luck here. Do I press my luck and use the long pin going through the edge of the mat board? Yeah, I'm doing okay. And so this gives you an idea of what a stripe might look like. Isn't that fun looking? It looks like a candy cane or something like that. So it would be a gorgeous little finish on like an ornament or something like that. So I would do the same thing on the corner. I would just go to the corner, go in with my pin, then just turn the corner, but a hair off that corner as well. So you end up with a little loop. Okay, now I can feel with this last one, I want to show you what happened is my pin came out the back. It's still pretty close to the laying down pretty well. So I would actually probably leave that one if I didn't feel like I could get it to snug into the middle of the skinny mat board here. So, so that gives you kind of an idea of how to work your way around on both a foam core piece and a mat board piece. Now, I will say, you may do the ribbon edge on, say, an ornament, which would be beautiful. So in that case, you would have stretched and laced your front. Let's pretend for a moment, shall we? This is your beautiful stitched ornament. And then this is your backing that you've also maybe stretched and laced or did with the stitchery tape finish. And you're going to go ahead and say if you whip stitch the front to the back. So now we have a completed ornament. All right, I know they don't match. We're just kind of using our imagination here. So now we've got the front and the back attached. So you can now do the same thing with the ribbon edge, but the pin is gonna get buried between the layers of whatever you use to stretch and lace the front and whatever you use to stretch and lace the back. It might be 2 pieces of mat board. It might be a piece of foam core and mat board. What you want to try and do is definitely when you insert the pin into that, that edge, you want to somehow try and catch it into one of the mat boards or the foam core or something like that. So that your ribbon edging of your ornament just doesn't like boop, pop out. If you don't want to do that, you can always just put a little bit of glue, just a tad onto the end of your pin. And then when you pop it in, the glue will dry and it'll just stay in place. So, so there we go. That's just an idea of how you can add a fun little ribbon edge. Hopefully this helped you and gave you some idea of what you can do. You can put it into the edge of a thinner mat board or a foam core, and you can kind of end up with a fun finish like this. So to talk about this particular finish a little bit, as I said, the stitching was actually laced onto a piece of mat board. It's got a little cush under there, so there's 2 layers of batting between the mat board and the stitching. Then I did the ribbon edge, and then I covered this piece of foam core, and then I covered the piece of mat board on the back. Then these are all attached to each other. So I did the pinning of the ribbon edge first. Then I actually ran several large strips of double-sided tape on the back side of the stitching and put that down onto this prepared mat board. And then same thing, when I put this fabric covered mat board onto the fabric covered foam core. And I apologize, I'm probably saying mat board when I mean foam core and foam core when I mean mat board. If you're confused, let me know. But in the meantime, so hopefully that helped you, give you some idea of what you could do, whether you use it on your Chalk on the Farm finishes or you use it on any other kind of finish. These patterns are all still available, and you can either get them through your local or online shop. These I actually think are available on my website as well, but I always urge you to support your local needlework shops for your fabric and supplies as well. So if you have any questions about the ribbon edge, or if you have a suggestion for a future tutorial, I will definitely entertain ideas. So in the meantime, enjoy the stitch.